Welcome back.
Perfect.
I think that's a pretty good start, no?
All it is welcome back.
Welcome back.
Tell me a story, Jonah.
Oof. Before I tell you the story, I listened to the episode back and we had some reflections on it. And this is kind of going off script because I wasn't going to say anything. But I have to admit, it's not my most favourite episode. And I think that's okay to say. In other episodes, we hit flows and we hit tangents and it felt like we struck. We gold?
Struck gold.
What's that word? No, but if you are doing it, we're striking gold?
Yeah.
It feels like in other conversations, when we talk about circles, we are striking gold. And I felt like a lot of the episode I was waiting for a moment like that. That's just my reflection.
Maybe that's part of it.
Maybe that's part of it.
Because going off script is going away from the norm, so it doesn't feel norm.
Wow.
And so
I appreciate that.
we got to learn what it feels like.
Yeah. That's sick.
And we have some people that we're sharing these videos with. Shout out. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
But getting two opinions from people completely outside of our circle, they didn't see a difference.
Well, that's cool.
They loved it and they thought it was awesome.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, so
Nice.
that hyped me up a little bit.
Cool. All right. Well,
I think we both get emotionally attached to certain topics.
and are quite self-critical, probably.
That too, yeah.
We finished the episode thinking about going off script and coming to this episode with the story of going off script. So that's how we're going to kick it off, hey?
Yeah.
So I feel like my story will feed, or no, it's not my story. The story that I'll share about you and me and our experience of going off script will lead into today's topic quite nicely.
Yeah.
Do you want to kick off with your story?
I can. I've got to get all the components in my head.
Yeah. I enjoy throwing you under the bus for some reason.
I think we both enjoy it.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what our friendship is built around.
Buses. Bus to buses.
Come on. We, outside of work, we have a small group of people that love to catch up, talk, reflect about the week, and eat fat, massive, humongous chicken schnitzels.
Oof.
We gather up and go to this bar that do an incredible deal. $10 for a monstrous schnitzel and serve of chips and gravy.
Not sponsored.
Not sponsored. They've bumped it up to the price of $12 now, but that does not stop us because the value is
Still pretty good.
much better than $12. Once we're finished there, if we are feeling it and we're not too exhausted, we'll go for a walk through the mall and the local area, and we'll just continue some conversation and reflection space. And a lot of it for me was just exposing a few more people that are close to me about this project, Stoke, and the podcast and the conversations we're having.
Oh, so you told the gang about it?
I told a few people.
That's sick.
Spread the word slowly.
You're doing all the hard work. I'm not.
We're both sitting here, and I think that's the hard part. Telling someone about it isn't too hard. And yeah, we're walking through the mall, and then it was late night shopping Thursdays. All the generic shops are open a bit later than normal, and I needed some new socks. And generally, I go for the lower market, some cheap stuff that just gets me through, and buy it in bulk for like $10.
Smart.
But this time, I decided to lash out a little bit.
Stop
and
it.
$23
For a pair of socks.
For one pair of socks. Down from 30, so it made me feel like I was winning. But
They gotcha.
yeah, I knew what I was signing up for. I knew I wanted to pay a little bit more and just see how long they last and if they feel better. I'm wearing them right now, and I've had the best day of my life. So
It's all down to the socks. Too.
yeah, it's all sock related. So I went into a famous shop called Anaconda. Anaconda is a crazy shop that I love going to, even if I don't want to buy anything. I'll walk out with something in my hand. So I went in there, had a look for some socks, and I found a pair of Mountain Designs, not sponsored, socks that I decided to buy, $23, and then I walked up to the counter, and I had just discussed to the two people beside me about our last episode and going off script and how I wanted to do that more. So I found it fitting that as they were observing me from a couple meters away, as I walked up to the counter, I would demonstrate my new ability, as I would call it. And the lady was a younger lady, and she seemed like it was very close to the end of her shift, and she was, just from my observation, not to judge a book by its cover, but I felt like she was ready to go home.
Mm-hmm.
And then I decided to change direction and go off script a little bit. She just did the generic, "Hey, how you doing?" I said, "I'm going to be real with you. I'm about to be a lot better." And I just like plopped the pack of socks on the counter. And she looked at me with a smirk and a confused look on her face. And she said, "Oh, yeah?" And I said, "When I get these socks on my feet, oh, I tell you." It was just quite a unique interaction.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting, which means she was nowhere
Definitely
near
not.
ready for that.
That's so good.
And yeah, we had an awesome time. She forgot to remove the security tag. So as I walked
Dude,
out,
that's so off script. She forgot the script.
I threw it out of her flow. I walked out a couple meters away out the door, and all the sensors went off, and then I had to turn around and walk back in and see her again. And then, yeah, we continued to laugh. And then on my actual way out the store, the final time after the tag was removed, she was like, "I hope your feet stay warm," or something. And I walked away and I said, "Yeah, thank you," which was kind of on script, but
But her comment to you is off script.
yeah, her
That's
comment,
so good.
me going off script and putting her in that space. One, she was open and engaged in that space, but two, it forced her to say something that she's probably never ever going to say to another customer.
Yeah.
Like you just don't say that.
Dude, what a story.
And literally that whole afternoon was just made better because I was just making a fool of myself a little bit and making people laugh, I guess.
That's so good. Man, and I think that's like the original kind of dream for these spaces that we, you and I talk about some things that we're thinking about or have experienced in the week or things that we find interesting, and that we talk about it, and that we wanted to record it so that if something in other conversations with other people pop up, you go like, "Oh, you could listen to this," or you send it to someone and then you talk about it afterwards and you experience it together. So I think that's awesome.
Come on.
That's good. I enjoyed that. My story involves both of us,
Yes.
and I would say heavily off-script inspired by you, and I just knew what you were doing, so I tagged along. But we went out for lunch on our lunch break, and we've mentioned this before, but sometimes there's more than just Lockie and I in the car. We like to ask questions and get to know each other because there is nothing more boring than driving on your lunch break and having, for me anyway, very mundane conversations. Like, I want to just be like, "What's going on in your world?" Like, but sometimes having questions to generate that type of conversation is difficult. Anyway, so you and I in the car, and you've invited someone else just for lunch. So we're driving. We get out of the property, and you said to the person with us, "Tell us a story," which is so off script because that could mean anything. So you said, "Tell us a story." And I said, "But it has to hit some criterias." and my criteria was that the story has to mean something to this person. Like, it has to be significant. It can't just be like, "I woke up today and I got to work," like, unless that was really significant. But it has to mean something. And then you added that there has to be some element of surprise. So I guess our questions have gone off script, but we've invited the person in the car to just go a bit off script and think a bit differently.
Should we give him a name? Should we just say Tom?
Oh, Tom.
Tom. Not their name. But
Tomster. Anyway, so then we're driving into town to get lunch, and Tom just shares some things that are happening in his world that are super deep and vulnerable and, like happening live in his world. I was taken back because the whole story, from what I was expecting the type of story to be, was a complete surprise. So tick that criteria. And it actually meant something to him because of the way that he was sharing it and the circumstances around it. Anyway, and then we spent like ordering lunch and walking and getting back into the car and driving back and even back on site, asking questions and dropping in like potential advice. I hate the word advice, and just catching a bit of Tom's heart and world and around it. And I feel like I left feeling way more connected and probably like way more compassionate for Tom. And it just felt like that whole lunch adventure was off script.
Mm.
And I really enjoyed it. And I think it feeds quite well in today's topic, which is all about the power of stories.
Mm. Unpack.
Unpack.
Open up your lunchbox and see what you got.
Oh, okay. This is what I packed for lunch today. This is what I think. I believe that we are designed to tell and hear stories. So I think it's actually very hard to communicate something about your life not in story form. We've been wired a certain way to respond well to stories or to feel deeply about stories. So, you know, the first episode of this podcast where we spoke about, well, it's not the first episode, it's episode 1.
Yeah.
When it's an introduction to Lockie and myself, like we're sharing stories. Like you shared stories about previous workplaces and so did I. And throughout different episodes, we've spoken about juggling. We've spoken about
Board games,
family history. Like it just naturally comes out of us. Even we've kicked off this episode with 2 stories. One about you buying socks, one about going to lunch. We're just naturally wired to tell stories. If I asked you to tell me about your day, it has to come out in story form. Like
I'd be very interested to hear it not in story form.
Yeah, like you have to really think about it. And you know, if you said, I started my day waking up, to me that sounds like once upon a time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I woke up this morning and suddenly we're in this story. We're wired, we're built, there's something about us that responds well to stories and wants to hopefully generate a good story with our lives and share that.
Yeah, I just get enthused in if we were to go back and do episodes 1 to 4 again, and just make a rule that we couldn't tell a story, and just see what that would look like. I can't even imagine. Would it be dot point form?
Yeah, like.
I can't even comprehend what
But it's
approach you
interesting
would
because
take.
if we try and do like, tell me about your day in not story form. If you go dot point, it's like dot point 1 is woke up at 6:30, and you're like, well, you're kind of beginning a story here because the next one you're gonna walk me through the story. It's very interesting.
When we were discussing this as a topic and talking about concepts and just getting it in our head, you brought up the Baker theory.
Yeah, you remember that?
I was wondering if you would, 1, share it, but 2, retell it to me.
Yeah.
Just so I can get it back in my head.
Yeah. So this isn't an original thought from me.
Yeah.
But another quality, power, or character of a story is that it helps us remember information. So the Baker theory is that if I asked you to remember a name, say it was John Baker, if you just solely try and remember John Baker, chances are you're not going to be able to remember it for very long. But if I tell you a story that John Baker is actually a baker and he gets up at 4 a.m. every morning and he drives to his little bakery in a little small town, and at 4:30 in the morning he opens his bakery and he starts kneading bread, and he cooks it and all the elements of baking bread, and then he opens up his shop and he starts selling bread at 8 a.m. and this baker's name is John Baker. The chances are you're going to remember his name because of the story. And you'd be like, oh, what was he doing? Oh, he woke up at 4 a.m. and he was going to the bakery. Oh, like, he's a baker. Oh, it's John Baker. Like, there's this whole power connected to it. Ancient Middle Eastern cultures would share information through stories. So they would try and remember people. They were trying to remember significant moments that happened in their world by recounting the story. And it would help people remember things that have happened and remember characters and that kind of stuff. And they're kind of harnessing the power of a story that connects it to like a memory or like a core thing. And so the idea is, like, if you have a point for someone to remember or you have information for someone to remember, if you share it in a story type form, there's higher chance that the person will remember it.
I think most stories will paint a picture or create a visual image
Yeah.
of something.
Yeah.
And that's what would make it easier to remember.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting concept.
Yeah. You actually shared with me what's called a parable. A parable is a word story. So it's a story that is trying to convey a meaning that's so unrelated to the story. And the parable that you told me about was the donkey in the well. Do you want to share that story?
I can do my best.
Yeah.
This is not perfect because it was one that just popped up in my feed, but I fell in love with it because of what we do daily in taking people on an experience and trying to create a memorable moment. And when we talk about painting a picture and then getting meaning from that picture to create it in a memory and take it away, I think when I read this or heard this story, it just landed really well. So I'll do my best. But the story is about a retired donkey that was out in the bush somewhere and fell into a abandoned well, just a big pit that was unused. The donkey was not quite useful anymore. It was on its last legs. And a farmer discovered it like squealing from a distance one day. And so the farmer went to, as you would, go and figure out what happened to this donkey and what the noise was and where it was coming from. The farmer discovered the well, and then he quickly realised that there was a donkey down the bottom in distress, and he by no means had the equipment to retrieve this donkey. It's meters down in a well, and there is, I would assume at this time, no cranes and no lifts and no the stuff that you would be able to use right now if you needed to. You wouldn't have a hold of that. The farmer essentially decided that the donkey and the well were both not as useful as they once were, and that an easy way to fix the problem would be to make the tough decision to fill the well and essentially bury the donkey at the same time. So he called on his neighbours and they all began to shovel dirt into the well, which creates quite a, for me, emotional picture
It's quite an image,
for the donkey. But the donkey continues to squeal and it can kind of understand what's happening as shovels of dirt go down and fall onto top of the donkey's head and onto the donkey's back and beside it, basically raising the level of the ground up above the donkey's, like, what are they, hoofs or feet or
hoofs? Sure.
hoofs? We'll go with it.
Sure.
Hoof-eye.
Perfect.
Yeah, after a while the donkey stopped and the farmers were at a distance, like tossing dirt from a pile and a hole that they were digging. So they couldn't see the donkey the whole time. But once the donkey stopped, the farmer gained curiosity of, like, have we buried, or like what is the circumstance here? And as he looked down the well, he was a bit taken back to see that the donkey was just standing there. He wasn't, like, buried, he wasn't squealing, he was just kind of content and just looking at the wall in front of him. And so then he continued to, like, throw a spade of dirt into the well, and it would land on the donkey, and the donkey would do, if you picture like a wet dog.
I'm picturing it. As soon as you took a pause, I went there in my mind. Yeah.
If you picture like a wet dog shaking all the water off it, that's essentially what the donkey was doing.
Yeah.
And the donkey, every spadeful of dirt that went into the well, the donkey would let it sit, then, like, shake it off, and then kind of, like, do a little stomp and create a new level of ground. And as the farmers continued to pour dirt on dirt on dirt, the donkey just kept, like, shaking it off and stepping up, shaking it off and stepping up, until after a couple of hours the donkey was, like, head level with the top of the well, which is just bonkers. Yeah. What a crazy way to go from, oh, we're going to put this thing out of its misery, to we've just saved its life.
Yeah.
It's a crazy turnaround.
Yeah.
They just essentially had rescued this donkey and got it all the way out. And then it just kind of, like, waddled away, and the farmers didn't really know what to do or how to celebrate. But I take some lessons from a story like that. Did you want to jump in?
Before you reveal the lessons.
Yeah.
If you said to the people listening, or if we said to whoever's listening, just take that story and what could it mean? Like, I'm imagining the lessons that you're about to reveal to us have nothing to do with farming or a donkey or wells.
Or a well, yeah.
But what has happened is that there is a message hidden inside of a story, and you've just presented it so beautifully that I'm intrigued by the lessons that you're going to share. And I also feel the invitation of going, what could it mean? Like, I can think about that. And it's a genius way of like passing information or passing a thought for like self-discovery. And like, from you telling that story, it's generated a feeling in me of curiosity. And that you even said the image that the story presented in you of a donkey getting buried is like emotional. And that's a story will do that. It will generate an image in your head that is generated emotion. Now, I don't know if this story actually happened, but from the donkey that we're talking about doesn't exist. And yet I still feel sorry for it.
I think what's cool too is like, I have a picture of what this donkey looks like and the well and the scenario.
Yeah.
And so do you.
Yeah.
But I could, if we were to draw it, imagine how different
So different.
the picture would be.
It's generating a similar feeling, however.
It does kind of tie back. We'll get to what I noted as a lesson. But,
yeah.
It loops back to when we were talking about doing a giant swing and asking good questions in the sense of like, what did you not learn about the giant swing? This is the story or this is the vehicle, but what are the takeaways and what message has been passed to you by using this that you couldn't achieve without this?
Yeah. Some of the best, and we will get to the lessons, we will not forget.
20 minutes, tune back.
Some of the greatest communicators in the world that I really enjoy listening to often start like presentation or, whatever they're sharing with a story. And they'll have this transition phrase into the topic that they're about to talk about. And it's something like, what am I saying? Like, that's what they'll say. So they'll finish the story of the donkey and the well. So the donkey treads on the dirt that's getting thrown in and kind of steps out of the well even and wanders away and didn't get buried. And then the speaker will say, what's my point? What am I trying to say? And then he like launches into, and you kind of have some idea, but then the communicator will spring into their point. And often I remember the story, and the story leads me to the point that someone would want to talk about, and that's how I remember, rather than remembering the information or the point and then being like, oh yeah, and he told that story about the donkey. It would be the other way around.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, let me get to my lessons.
Please.
These are just some thoughts that I had one night, alone in my room, doom scrolling social media.
Go off script on that, brother.
So, my comparison was, we talk about the concept of mud a lot, which is, many people talk about it. The first time I discovered it was from one of Simon's videos, Simon Sinek, awesome dude.
Check him out.
Great brain, not sponsored. He talks about the concept of mud and how people fall into mud, and it's not physical mud, it's not dirt, and it's not like, that's not what it is, but it's just like emotional distress or emotional weight that sits on you. And when people are in mud, often you try to like pull them out or try to help them and fix the problem, whereas generally when someone's in mud, they don't need that. They just need you to sit with them and be in the mud with them so that they're not alone, and you just go through the emotion. And we talked about, when we said asking good questions, that sometimes when you sign yourself up to do that, you're going to be confronted with some pretty big stuff. When we asked Tom to share us a story, we definitely signed ourselves up for something that was a lot more meaningful.
Yeah.
And so within this setting, the donkey and the well, I take the donkey as a human, not as a donkey. And I pictured the dirt as the mud and the psychological weight that gets put on you. And day to day, you're going to get dirt like shoveled on top of you. But you can either stand there and just let it keep piling up.
Get buried by it.
Get buried. It's going to cover your hoofs. I'm going to call my feet my hoofs now. It's going to cover your hoofs. It'll go to your knees and then your waist. And if you let it build up to your knees, not the end of the world. Like, you can still get out. You let it go to your hips, you're starting to struggle a lot. And if you let it build up to your shoulders or your neck or your head, that's when it gets catastrophic.
Yeah.
So you can hold it, but at some point you have to like shake it off and you have to like dispose of it. And if you do what the donkey does in this video and you get dirt tossed on you and you shake it off and you step up, you're going to get more dirt thrown on you, but you can't hold it for too long. You have to learn to like shake and step up
It's good.
until eventually you pop out of the well,
Yeah.
which I think is
Yeah.
crazy. Let me keep going.
No, dude.
The other
keep
addition to this, which was a crazy thought, is that in this sense of shaking it off and stepping up, at the same time that you're, like the dirt's coming on you and then you're shaking it off and you're stepping onto it, you're also avoiding the possibility of like re-falling into the hole. Because you're sitting with the dirt and you're letting it be there, you're avoiding that. There's no more hole.
So good.
As you step up, there's no hole.
I had not considered that.
That's why I had to keep going.
I'm so glad.
I thought it was massive. I talked about perspective a while back when we gave ourselves 3 words.
Yep.
And something I've been working on a lot is perspective. And when you put yourself in the shoes of the donkey and you look at the story, it gives you a whole different perspective to if you were the farmer.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's my
Man.
that's my take.
And that was all from a story.
That's all from a 30-second TikTok.
Like crazy. The thing I get from it is using dirt to your advantage. So at the start of the story, when you hear about the farmer throwing dirt over the donkey, I go, oh no, like the donkey's going to get buried. Like he doesn't know,
Yeah.
you know. But the donkey goes, I'm going to use what's thrown at me as an advantage. And not to like get back at the farmers or whatever, but he's like, no, I'm going to take what comes my way and I'm going to use it to learn and stand upon, and it will help me like rise or like develop, or however you want to take that metaphor. But using it as an advantage. I'm like halfway through a book at the moment and it's called The Obstacle is the Way. And it's about how obstacles in life are inevitable. It's how you approach them and what you do with them, and you can swing them to your advantage, or you can let them bury you, and that's the story, dude. But that piece about filling in the hole, like it means that you're not going to fall in the hole again, dude. That's gold.
I think it relates a little bit, like talking to Tom in the car trip for lunch.
Yep.
And him sharing some things that had happened in his life.
Yep.
Were very relatable to things that had recently happened for me. And I reflect literally in the last 1 minute after finishing explaining myself. The concept of not falling in the hole is like no one wants to get into a scenario where they're uncomfortable or they're unhappy or they're emotionally distraught or whatever. But going through that at least once is going to potentially stop you from going through it again, because it's going to teach you a bunch of lessons and it's going to help you learn and develop and grow. Whereas if you meet someone who's never been through those things that you've been through, they're completely unaware and they could just be walking through the bush and fall in the well.
Yep.
And then they're going to have to learn the hard way.
Yep.
I think that's another reason why stories are important.
Yep.
It's because if I've gone through that and I was to share that story with Tom, I can stop him from falling in the well in advance.
It's good.
Oh,
Yeah.
what a circle.
It's even like it's being able to relate. So after he shared, you were ordering food, and I said to Tom, "Hey, when I was 19, this happened to me," and it wasn't exactly the same, but it parallels significantly.
Yep.
And I wasn't trying to go, so just listen to me and you'll be fine. All I did was I shared the story, and it's probably going to touch on where I want to go to next, but I just shared the snippet of like the hardest part of the story. I didn't tell him how I got there, and I didn't tell him how I got out. I just told him that I've been there. And that's like sitting in the mud of being like, I hear you, I know how you feel because here's my story, I've been there. And I didn't say anything about shaking dirt, like, because I didn't think it was my job at the time. I think it would probably be more significant coming from you in his world than me.
Yeah.
But if I can go, here's my story, and it reflects that you're not alone. You're not the only one that's been through this. That's going to be okay. Like a story can do that too. It makes us relatable. Our stories relate.
Yeah, something really strong in there where you didn't include the details of how you got there and how you got out, which is, I think, how you got out is the hardest thing to avoid saying, because all you want to do when someone's hurt is try and help and assist.
Yeah.
But the fact that you're not telling them how you got out, you're not helping. You're just sitting there and just being beside them, so that they can see that you understand the feeling and you connect in that space.
Yeah.
Which I think is a superpower in itself.
And sometimes that is the biggest help. Because I know when I've been in situations like Tom was talking about, when people just told me what to do, like I didn't do it.
Yeah.
But when someone was just listening to me and being like, yeah, that sucks. I've been there, I understand how you're feeling. Like that was more helpful to me than anything else. So it leads me to this thought about storytelling, where I ask myself, how do I become a good storyteller? Because we're talking about the power of it, and I like the word manipulation because it's off script, because everyone thinks it's like a negative thing. We don't want to be manipulative. But how do we manipulate stories so that they're the most powerful, or we can use them in the most effective way? And I think about, most people, not you, Lockie, love watching movies.
Wow, call me out.
because they share stories, and we love heroic stories. We love love stories. We love stories about underdogs. Even so that there's like movies and books, and even like some of the best songs in the world, they're just stories. And so how do we become people who can tell good stories? And there's a bunch of things that we can go into, but what I enjoy thinking about is that one of the ways that we can become good storytellers is, one, we have to be on the lookout for good stories. So you're scrolling Instagram and you come across a really good story, and so you have a process of, I'm going to lock that away, I'm going to remember that. We go around our weeks looking for stories. So become somebody who has their eye out for a story. If someone can relate a donkey falling into a well to shaking off things that come in life your way to not fall in a hole again, you can connect anything to anything, is what I think. So we have to be on the lookout for a good story, big or small. And the other one is, when we're sharing a story, we have to think about how we share it. You don't actually have to start at the start of a story. Sometimes it's more powerful to start in a very specific place of a story that is captivating and intriguing, or leaves enough information out that you're like, what's going on? There's a very old movie. It's called Vantage Point. You probably haven't seen it.
I haven't seen much.
I am a fraction older than you. The movie's called Vantage Point. So what happens is, at the start of the movie, there's some sort of like presidential character, and they are making a speech, and a bomb goes off. And that's the start of the story. And then the movie like rewinds, and then when it stops rewinding, you have been introduced to a new character, and you see their day play out up until when the bomb goes off. And then it rewinds, and when it stops, you're introduced to another character, and then you see their day play out until the bomb goes off, and you're getting pieces of the story, but you cannot figure it out until right at the end because of the way that they piece it together. And it's an incredibly well told story. And I often think about that movie when I'm like, if I want to share, I know what story I want to share, and I know the point that I want to come across. So where do I start that's going to generate or manipulate the most power out of this story? Do I start at Once Upon a Time, or do I start at the ending, or do I start right before the most critical part of the whole thing? It's the setup of a story is very important, and you have to think outside the box, and it's not the same for every story. You can't cookie cutter a story.
I just pulled up a screenshot that I took. I was in the car driving to work, and I had a YouTube video on autoplay.
Yep.
and it was just another version of the donkey in the well, and then it ended, and because it's set up for just like, I don't know, like hands-free mode, it just ticks over to the next video
Right.
that's suggested.
Yeah.
And the title of it was How to Master the Art of Storytelling,
Oh,
which is an incredible
your phone's
reference.
been listening to you.
A lot. It's been listening to us. I'll give credit to the channel it came from, Valuetainment. But he talks through a bunch of things here in categories within storytelling.
Yep.
And one of the things is 5 different types of storytellers. There's the elements of a great storyteller, and then when stories are effective. And one of the like highest ranking elements of a great story is something that creates anticipation. And when you talked about just starting in the middle or at the end and then rewinding, just leaving gaps within a story that
Yep.
keeps someone thinking and guessing, or just strings them along, is, I think, like the nail on the head. It was like it's the perfect part
Yep.
of telling a story, which I guess after talking about going off script, I spent the whole week just intentionally going off script. And I feel like after this episode and into the future, I'm just going to continuously try and work on telling story, because it's one thing to understand it, but it's another thing to deliver it and do it justice.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a space I really want to touch into, especially within my job, where I get to share knowledge and experience with youth and adults. To be able to do that confidently through a story that's engaging and creates anticipation is only going to strengthen what I deliver, but their experience.
Yeah. I love that. Another thing I was thinking about was like the tone in which you tell a story. So you have kind of like tones that are like motivator, where it's like an inspiring, it's a G up, it's a story of like
David Goggins.
yeah. But even like, you know, you could turn the donkey and the well story into, if the words that you used and the tone that you're speaking is motivating, and you're placing the person that's listening as the donkey, like you said, if you use motivator tones, you're changing that story into motivation. You know, so there's other tones that you can use in stories. So like one of them is like a commander. So if you need to get a point across and it needs to be directive and it needs to be hard hitting, you can use more of like a boss commander type tone to tell a story, and it cuts through. You might want to, the other one I'm thinking of is like the tone is more like compassionate. And so you're telling a story about a donkey and a well, and the words that you use, they're generating feeling and emotion, and you're trying to be empathetic and compassionate about the type of dirt that's coming in. And so like there's different ways to even like tell stories with the different tones that you use. One of my like go-to ways of telling stories is leaning heavily on vulnerability, and that often comes out as telling like personal stories. And so like what we asked Tom, it has to mean something to me. And I enjoy telling stories that aren't about me and are separate to my life to convey a meaning. But if I really want to like drive home a point, telling a story that's like, hey, this happened to me, or like this is a part of my journey that I can link in, and there's some significant piece, like there's some significant victory or suffering, if I have a story that has those elements embedded, people can sniff out authenticity and vulnerability. And if you insert that into a story, the power and the potency and the effect of that story is like so potent and like strong that you can't forget it. There was 3 years ago, there was at our place of work, there's a big youth camp that happens at the end of the year.
You're telling us a story. I like it.
Yeah, I can't help it. And on one of like it's this kind of like big rally youth thing. There's like music and people come in and talk and that kind of stuff. So I was asked to come in and teach on a topic on one of the sessions. And I told a story, and I used a phrase, and my phrase was, "It's good to remember some things." And I pretty much told stories all the way through it. And one of the stories is so significant to my story and so painful but I had to share it because it tied in so well. And I actually I bumped into someone 2 weeks ago. This is 3 years on. And we were not in this work context. We were out and about in real life, and they came up to me and they said, "It's good to remember some things." And I was like, yes. Like, I embedded stories in a way that they have remembered and taken on board, hopefully. And when they saw me, they were like, "I remember those stories." And the point of the story was that it's good to remember things. And I think how I use vulnerability and openness and authenticity generates that connectedness in people. But that's scary. And I think we have to be quite brave to do it and quite open. And, we're sharing, it's almost like sharing chinks in your armor that are vulnerable. And like, if you stab me here, it's going to hurt, but I'm going to show you because you'll remember it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, the next 2 points down from the first one, which was like creating anticipation and curiosity.
Yeah.
In this video was show feelings and body language.
Wow.
Which I think speak volumes to what you just said.
100%. That's great.
If you make yourself vulnerable, then it changes the story completely. Or if I was to describe, like, really paint the picture of the donkey, and like the color of the fur and the feel of the fur and how it looked, and
the
paint
look
a better
in its
picture.
eyes when it's getting buried.
Like, that becomes such more emotional, attaching story rather than like motivation kind of power. So the words you use and the tone you use and the speed of delivery and your body language, like every single component. If you told the story with your eyes open versus closed, like you literally could change the whole perception of it.
Yeah, 100%.
I think it's also up to the person receiving the story. If you were to tell it to a room of, let's say in our context, like 40 kids, then there's probably a percentage. Haven't done any research, but there's probably a percentage.
I love it.
A percentage of people that would instantly tie the story and components of it to their life. And they would be their picture of this whole story would be so different to the person directly next to them. Even though it's been delivered the same and the intention's been the same. If it sparks like a thought or a special piece within their life, then it's going to be a whole different story for them. And they're going to have a complete different takeaway. Yeah. Which I think is scary, but crazy.
Yeah.
I like it.
A couple of episodes we spoke about experiential learning. And a different way of saying going on an experience is going on a story. Because the experience becomes like a story, so we get to take people out on abseiling or rock climbing or huge giant swings, or we take them on X-beds and we do raft building. And the idea is that we take them on an experience. And a part of our job is getting them to reflect on their experience. And we often start by trying to recount the story. And a lot of people will connect with different parts of the story because more, they might lean more towards, say, abseiling a cliff is more terrifying than going on a big swing for them. And so they're going to remember that part of the story. Whereas someone else connects to a different part of the story, and that's what you're saying. You and I could go on a similar experience, but have such different connections to the story. That is going to go up. Lockie's about to put green leaves just straight on embers. There's going to be so much smoke involved. That's the beautiful power of a story, is that it can transcend so many thoughts and feelings and people just in one vehicle, one story. Dang, that's a flame.
Wow. The last key point that I screenshotted in this video was when stories are effective. I'll rattle off a few and then I'll tell you my favourite one.
Sick.
A few were moments of tension in a space of coaching, leadership or development, raising kids, selling, validating a point, or my favourite one, when nothing else works.
Oh my goodness. I felt that on the back of my neck. Like my hairs went on end.
I often explain to people that I have on a session a concept or a theory, and it just never lands. And so what I do more and more now as I'm getting into the art of storytelling is I just be like, okay, well, hear me out. So imagine,
Yep.
and then done. And
Yep.
again, me just saying imagine is being like once upon a time.
Yeah.
And so then, yeah, you just start pitching a story of such because you're just not getting the point across and they're not visualizing it and they're not understanding. So then you have to step into a different avenue of something that's relatable or something that shows feeling or something like
Yep.
similar.
Probably 2 months ago, hey, guess what? I'm sharing a story. About 2 months ago, there was an all boys group that came in and they wanted me to talk about some very specific things in like theory and concept form. And they were like year 11 boys and they were only there for a day. So they had driven quite a long way just to be at the campsite for a day.
That's a tight turnaround.
Yeah, and honestly, half the day they're inside listening to people talk.
Yeah.
And one of those people was me. And I was halfway through sharing concepts and theories, and I was looking at these boys, and I was like, if I was sat there listening to me, I would also be switched off. And I literally stopped mid-thought, and I said to them, hey, can I tell you about one of the worst days of my life? And all of the boys looked at me and they were like, okay. Like, and they had shock on their face and curiosity and intrigue. And I then proceeded to tell them about one of the worst days of my life. And when I finished, I didn't have to stress the point of like the concept or the theory. Like I had transmitted it in through a story. And it was exactly what you were saying. Like nothing else worked. I had tried to coach and give them statistics. I had tried to like, relate to them on their level or whatever. Literally nothing else worked. And so I was like, I'm gonna have to use a story here. And I hope it worked. It looked like it did. So, but yeah, I love that point where nothing else works.
When nothing else works, tell a story.
Just Hail Mary a story, see what happens. That's good. That's
Ooh.
good. Have you got any other thoughts to throw into the fire in Stoke?
I've just run a hot lap of our surroundings to gather a small stack of wood because our fire was
We're
burning
low.
up. I think it was a representation of my plans for this episode. Everything that I felt I wanted to talk about, I felt like I've brought to the table.
Yeah, me too.
A big thing for me is the implementation, and after going off script in an episode and having that discussion, what this does for people listening is creates a bit of different train of thought, but for us it creates a space where we can then discuss, think of ideas, and then go and implement and try and learn and develop personally.
Yeah.
So for me, I will walk away from this and try to look at story and how to implement it to, one, do my job better, but two, just grow and be better as an individual.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what that looks like.
Yeah.
I'd love to brainstorm, but that would be very boring for the viewership.
Yeah, and we don't have a whiteboard here.
No. Hopefully in I don't know, I'm not going to put a number on it, but in a few episodes we might have a visual for said podcast.
What a gift.
What a gift. What a privilege.
So if we wrap up the episode with what we normally do about what we're going to do in the week and talk about next podcast, got a couple of ideas. But
shoot.
But I also, when we were walking up here, you said to me that we have 5 subscribers.
Oh, 2 of which are us.
We have 3 subscribers. But and I don't think we do this often, but I would, if someone was listening to this episode, what I would hope that they would take away from this is that the story that they're living has power, and that in the right circumstances, in the right timing, to the right people, you have to share parts of your story. You have to throw off the dirt and the mud and stamp on it to get higher, to have a story. If that donkey gets filled in, like that's its story. And it's a pretty sad one. But we have an opportunity to live and leave behind a story. And I think that is an incredible gift. But my encouragement is let's not waste it. Let's live and leave behind a good story, and let's be on the lookout for powerful stories that we can remember for ourselves and learn from, and also share where it's the right time, and not in a way of giving advice if it's not the right time and space, but that we can just land such a beautiful, well-crafted story into somebody else's story that it just generates just a bit of magic. Oh, it's good.
You just went there.
I did. I felt it. For the week ahead, there potentially is a double-barreled challenge. One is to look for a powerful story that happens, and the other is to also share with somebody else, whether that's a school group that's in, or colleagues or friends and family, to share a story with them somehow, and just attempt to manipulate the power of a story.
I think I'd also be interested in what we did with Tom in the car, of creating a bit of a space, safe space, and then just asking people without any context, just be like, tell me a story. And I think I want to do that more and see if I can gain access to a story. It's almost like we've got three goals, I guess. Two from you, one from me. But even if we just tick a box, we both achieve one of them, I think it would be awesome to gain a story from someone within our circles and bring it onto the talk. I think it would be awesome.
The two challenges are gain a story and share a story. Gain a story from someone else.
And give one out.
And try and craft one in a different way that we have before to somebody else.
I like it.
Gain a story, share a story.
That's so good.
Oof. Man, it's been a pleasure. You know what? We were striking gold this episode.
we struck the striking the circuit of a non-sponsored episode. We have a significant list of future topics.
Yeah.
But based off the start of this podcast, which we described was once a joke, made a reality.
Yep.
We planned out 5-ish episodes, and this is the last of the written plan. And then everything else is turn up and figure out what we're going to do.
Yeah.
So I'm super excited to look through our list, add to the list, build it up, cut some stuff out.
Yep.
And I'm so excited to see what the next chapter is.
Me too.
If we're talking stories.
Yeah.
We
do have an interesting idea for episode 10, but we'll keep it under wraps, shall we? Just in case it doesn't work out.
Yeah. We've got to get there.
We've got to get there.
I think we've done incredible to get 5 strong episodes.
Yeah.
One which, from our opinion, a little bit below average. But
we've heard it's strong from others.
We need a bad one to make the good ones look good.
That's true. It's been a pleasure.
Donkey in a well.
Man, it's such a good story.
Donkey.
And in the morning, I'm making waffles.